Hello and welcome to this video on quince as a species for bonsai. Quince are a very impressive species of flowering trees that are well suited to becoming bonsai. Quince fall into two main categories, Chinese quince and European quince. Both flower and look largely similar, but are different and distinct species. Fortunately, all behave roughly the same way and can be trained as bonsai the same way. As a bonsai, you're taking advantage of both its very dark green oval-shaped leaves, the coarse appearance, and the very, very obvious flowers. Because of this, they're generally made as larger bonsai trees. This is accentuated by the features, and because it has flowers, often they don't scale as well. This means you need a larger tree to compensate for it. This has its advantages as well. The flowers come out in spring, but they are available in a wide range of colours. This does depend on which cultivar you're growing, but you can also get a fruit out of it. This means that if you're looking at a miniaturized tree with fruit as a final product to show on it, this is a really good specimen. Or you could take them off and simply have the floral display. As the tree continues to go through its cycle, it enters into autumn, where its leaves will turn an orange-red colour and then fall off, leaving you with a bare tree. Because of the nature of the quince, they're often used in either a multiple trunk or similar formats. They're also useful on occasion for the formal and informal upright. On occasion you'll also see them styled as a broom. Less often, but still occasionally, as a cascade. The trees, when they occur naturally, can grow up to 8 meters in height and up to 8 meters across. They have large fruit and long leaves. Although the fruit begins green and turns dark grey to white, it also has fur on it. The fruit turns from that dark grey whitish colour from the fur through to a yellow colour, and they have a strong smell to them. The leaves occur alternating, and they're roughly 10 to 11 centimeters in length. They're also quite clear in the way they are, as they have a solid margin around the edge. As mentioned, the flowers occur throughout the growing season, primarily spring. Once you begin to enter into summer, they fall off so the fruit can grow. The flowers come in several formats. You can get a standard variety which has 5 petals, or a double flowering variety which has 2 rows of petals. As noted, the quince comes in a variety of colours, mostly ranging from white through to red. These colours, along with the very obvious appearance, means they're great for a floral display. The flowers last a long time, and in some cases can be used from winter through to spring, depending on whether or not you're looking at the Chinese quince or the European. The two varieties are slightly different in when they flower and how long the flowers last. This is fortunate in some ways. Because of this, they're often available as an ornamental variety, which means you won't get fruit, but you will get a variety of quince that is better developed to present a floral display. That means you get more colour and hopefully for longer. This also means that they're often available in nurseries and other similar places, and occasionally may be removed from gardens or similar, where you can create a more established bonsai. Either way, if you're looking at turning a quince into a bonsai, you can use most good quality growing medium. Primarily, the consideration will be to ensure that it is well draining. This is true of all bonsai. Watering should follow the same routine as with most trees. You want to keep the soil slightly moist, but not let it dry out either. You may need to give it a lot more water in summer when the heat begins to hit. You do not want it to dry out. If you're looking at having to keep fruit on the tree, this is especially important. If the tree begins to dry too much, you will lose that fruit. You also won't get a good floral display. If you are keeping your tree inside over winter, you should try and keep it over a shallow tray with gravel and water. This will give it ambient moisture and will help at least a little bit in trying to prevent some of the loss of moisture in the soil due to the nature of how the houses are heated. There's not as much ambient moisture in the air, and this means it'll come out of the soil and from the tree. Fertilizing is another consideration. You should look at using a solid fertilizer every 3 to 6 months, and using a liquid fertilizer every other week during the growing period. It's particularly important to use a fertilizer with a high phosphorus and potassium content shortly before and during the flowering season. You do this to promote flowers and the development of fruit. Given the nature of the tree and the fact that it doesn't necessarily grow as aggressively as some species, you don't need to use as much nitrogen or other fertilizers, but it's good to give it some support anyway. Pruning is a little bit more difficult with the quince, primarily because of the flowers. If we're looking at the Chinese quince, you do not want to prune anything until after the fruit begins to develop. You want to have as much opportunity for flowers to appear and bloom as possible, but you do want to remove the fruit once it begins to develop and leave only a few on the tree. The more fruit on the tree, the more energy goes into it, and the less into the tree itself. This means less growth, less ramification, and often weakening of branches. Once you've removed the fruit you no longer want, and you may wish to also remove flowers that are beginning to die off, you can begin pruning the tree. Pruning is done by taking the branch back to 2 leaves. These 2 new leaves will form branches eventually. This will lead to the obvious problem of a lot of branches in a very small space. If the canopy is too populated with these branches, you can remove some of the largest. Doing this will help you to reduce the number of leaves and the number of branches overall, but because of the nature of the styles that it's suited towards, you shouldn't notice these particularly, and especially not after a year of growth. If you still find that there's trouble with the sheer amount of bulk from the leaves, you can cut the leaves in half. This will reduce their size, and over time force the tree to reduce the leaf size. If you have a very junior or developing tree, you don't want flowers or fruit at all. Removing these early will allow the tree to put the energy into growth. This could be branches, development, styling, or more, but doing this in the early years will get you a better tree sooner. The quince does have one particularly noteworthy thing you need to be aware of when pruning it, and that is it will sucker. That is, it will produce shoots from near the base of the tree and from roots. You want to prune these as soon as possible. You do this in order to ensure all energy goes into the main tree and not these suckers. If you don't do so, you won't get a good trunk or nabari. Assuming that your tree has gone through the cycle of growth, flowers, fruit, and has lost its leaves, it should now be in autumn and it is time to wire. You wire after all the leaves have fallen from the tree. This is for several reasons, and the first and simplest of which is you can see what you are doing. As mentioned, with more developed trees it's often hard to see what's happening, and it can be quite congested if the leaves are there. This makes autumn the perfect time. While you're wiring, be mindful of the fact that the older the branches are, the more brittle they will become. This means wiring with these is not a great idea. You can use various techniques such as guy wires to shape them. It is best to try and get the earlier branches in the positions you want for the long term early on. That's because they are pliable and flexible and will not break. The other advantage is that if you are looking at this, getting the wire on the tree in autumn, you can leave it there through to summer, and then begin wiring them in the right position then, because new shoots will be pliable in summer when the sap is flowing freely. Don't try and wire during spring though. Either get the wire on in autumn and wait for summer, or wire in summer, which can sometimes be difficult. Doing this in spring is a bad idea. The flowing sap creates a very brittle growing branch, and they will break very easily. So avoid that. The quince, as a general rule, should be kept out in the sun. Not full sun if you're in a very hot place, but rather morning sun. If you're in a more temperate environment, all day light is okay. You need to be mindful of whether or not the pot is going to have enough water in it. Keeping it in a bright, light and airy spot will give it the best chance at growing well. If it's in a sunny but damp spot, you may find mold is a concern, and this will diminish the number of flowers that occur. If it's somewhere that is sunny and dry, water may be a concern, and you can see where the problems go. The tree will grow well in a sunny and warm place. It is somewhat frost hardy, but it should not be considered somewhere that could be kept outside in winter. It needs to be moved into a protected place. This is because the extreme cold and frost can cause damage, particularly the flower buds and leaf buds. You can keep it outside in a hothouse or similar, or move it inside. If you find that your outside environment gets below 5 degrees Celsius, then your tree needs to be moved somewhere safe. If your tree has survived its year of growth, gone through winter, and it's now entering its second year, it may be time to repot it. This is true of younger trees. Older trees may take up to 5 years to be repotted. This is done at different times depending on who you ask. Some will suggest it's done in early spring, others say in early autumn. It will depend very much on whether or not you're using the European or Chinese quince. Each of them has its own particular quirks in regards to repotting, but is otherwise relatively similar all round. The soil, if you are looking at repotting it and you're hoping to encourage a more bright colour, and your tree is otherwise healthy and going well, might benefit from slightly acidic soil. This can help to exacerbate the colours, as is true of some species of tree overall. Otherwise, using a good quality all-round standard soil is best. The quince, as a general rule, is not particularly prone to any noteworthy diseases or pests. The use of a standard pesticide will deal with most everything it has to tackle, whether that is aphids, scale, or similar. Overall, the quince is actually a surprisingly beginner-friendly tree, or at least once you get used to dealing with it. Knowing what to give it, when to give it, and what to allow it to grow and what to cut away means you'll get the best growth, the best display, and the most surprising return. Showing people a miniature fruit on a tree is often quite surprising, and it's not expected with a bonsai, unless you are familiar with bonsai. But for those who aren't initiated, for lack of a better word, the quince can be an incredibly interesting tree, and great for beginners because of that display. Those bright, vibrant colours are really nice. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.